Good day, boys and girls. We're on movie 3 of the Psycho franchise, and considering this was the last movie to get a theatrical release, I'm not hopeful. Before we get started, make sure that you subscribe to this channel and click that little bell thingy to get notified. I post regular movie reviews and gameplays, all with a horror theme to them. So trust me when I say that you won't want to miss what's coming. Don't believe me? Stick around to the end of the episode to find out what movie I'll be discussing next time. Released only 2 years after Psycho 2, Psycho 3 tried to get Richard Franklin back as the director, but he ultimately declined. In his place, we actually have Anthony Perkins directing this time. Apparently, he was really resistant to it as well, as he'd never directed anything before and he wasn't confident in his abilities. But when he got into the swing of it, the people who worked with him were surprised by how well he took to it. He had so many ideas, in fact, that writer Charles Edward Pogue actually complained about Perkins calling him up in the middle of the night to suggest new ideas. Yeah, Tom Holland is gone as the writer. In his place, we now have the guy best known for The Fly? Wait, that's not so bad. Why did this movie perform so poorly? The movie opens up on Maureen Coyle, a nun who has recently lost her faith for, reasons, and she's running away from her convent. Literally running away. Like she doesn't even have a car, inspiring her to hitch a ride with some guy named Duke. Duke will not shut up.
Name's Dwayne, by the way. Dwayne Duke. Friends just call me Duke. Hey, watch the guitar. Going to LA to be a rock and roll star.
I'm considering this is a hitchhiking situation in a horror film, and Maureen's a nun, so she can't be the monster. I guess that leaves it up to the annoying douchebag. He tries to rape her, but Maureen ultimately gets away and continues on foot. Duke eventually makes his way to the Bates Motel, where Norman is still living with Mrs. Spool's corpse. And Duke asks if there are any jobs available. Norman is very eager about it too. It's weird. Like, you're running a failing motel and keeping an old woman's corpse in your attic. What about any of that makes you think that you should start hiring strangers on? After this, Norman goes to the diner where he used to work for some breakfast. Apparently they refurbished between movies too, because all I kept noticing was how much darker and more claustrophobic the diner seemed this time around. While he's here, he's approached by a reporter apparently doing a piece on the insanity plea, and whether or not people like Norman can ever fully be rehabilitated. The whole town treats her like a monster for it too, because apparently between movies they just randomly decided that Norman's okay now, and they need to just leave him alone. Like, you guys know that there's a middle ground where you can give him the chance to prove that he's changed, but you also don't need to name him Mr. Rogers of the Year or something. The reporter keeps trying to ask him questions, but he keeps getting distracted by Maureen Coyle, who has just reached the diner, and Norman believes that she looks a lot like Marion Crane from the first movie. Yeah, I guess they do both have short blonde hair. Fun fact, Anthony Perkins actually wanted to cast Janet Leigh in this role, which would have better communicated Maureen's resemblance to Marion, but apparently the studio didn't think that she was the right fit for the role, so they refused. Norman flees the diner in horror, but Maureen makes her way to the Bates Motel anyway, it apparently being the only hotel in town.
I'm so very tired.
Well, you won't find another place close.
Wait, why is it failing again? Yeah, it's poorly located, but when it's your only option, you kinda take what you can get. Maureen wants to run away when she sees that her would-be rapist is working there, but, you know, only option. Her being there greatly disturbs Norman, bringing back memories of what he did to Marion. He argues with the mother personality for a little bit, but ultimately gets dressed up in the wig and dress, goes down to Maureen's cabin, and gets ready to recreate that shower scene. But when he opens that curtain, he discovers not a frightened showering babe, but rather Maureen has cut her wrists in the bathtub. So all of a sudden, Norman finds himself calling an ambulance for his almost murder victim. After this, Norman and Maureen start a very awkward romance. They go on a date and slow dance, and oh my god, this is such an old people date. I love it. But in the meantime, people at the motel keep disappearing. Duke brings over a gal to have sex with, and after she spends an odd amount of time outside and topless, she gets stabbed by someone wearing a wig and dress. The whole town seems to decide to throw a party at the Bates Motel one night, during which a girl gets her throat cut. And all the while, it's made exceptionally clear that Norman is aware of these murders because he keeps cleaning up after them and blaming Mother. One thing that I will have to give this movie is that it shows Norman's mental illness from Norman's point of view. When he talks to Mother, we don't see him doing the voice, we just hear it.
You came back.
I never went away. Don't you know that by now?
Which, honestly, I'm kind of torn on. It would have made the scenes much creepier if we actually saw Norman take on the Mother persona. It just comes across as too normative to have her be an external voice. And also, it kind of made me wonder if they were changing the story from Norman actually taking on that Mother persona to her just being a hallucination. But then something happens at the end of the movie that made me realize that that's not what they're doing. It was just kind of inconsistent and confusing. Anyway, speaking about the end of this movie, let's talk about that for a little bit here. Duke kidnaps Mrs. Spools' corpse and tries to blackmail Norman into giving him money. But Norman just kind of kills Duke, so I guess that was the end of that conflict. Maureen goes to Norman, now aware that he's a serial killer. But for some reason, she's decided that he's the Virgin Mary, or that he's connected to the Virgin Mary. I don't know, it's all very confusing. But while Norman and Maureen are embracing, Mother calls Norman's name, and he turns around, which, for some reason, makes Maureen stumble down the stairs and get impaled on a statue. The reporter shows up then and finds Norman dressed as his mother. He chases her around the house for a little bit, speaking in Mother's voice, but at this point, Mother has basically just become one of those dolls that you pull the string and she repeats, "She's a whore," over and over and over again. They end up in the room where Mrs. Spool's corpse is being kept, and you think he's going to stab the reporter, but switcheroo! He destroys Mrs. Spool's corpse instead. Norman is arrested, but he makes some sort of comment about how he's finally free. But you know, that is a very sweet ending. He's finally confronted his mother and ready to move forward with his life, and why does he have Mrs. Spool's mummified hand in his lap? Good lord, there's still one movie in this continuity, isn't there? Okay, so, final thoughts. Of the first three movies, this is the one that feels the most like your average slasher movie. There were moments where I felt like I could have been watching any other late 80s slasher flick, like Friday the 13th, New Blood, or Nightmare on Elm Street 5, Dream Child, or something like that. You know, something very basic and paint by number. You got your boobs, you got your gore, you got your killer who's kept in the shadows for the majority of the movie's runtime. What else do you need? And that isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just so happens that I enjoy basic slasher movies. They're a good thing to just turn your brain off and enjoy. On another note, this movie is a lot more queer than Psycho 2 was. In Psycho 2, we never saw him dressed up as Mother, and there was a possible romance between him and Mary. You know, before Mary stabbed him anyway. But here, we do see Norman dressed as Mother, but more than that. The relationship between him and Maureen is a weirdly non-sexual one. Norman encourages Maureen to dress as conservatively as possible, and when they do try to have sex, they stop because it doesn't feel right. Of course, the text is that she's a nun and he's Norman Bates. But if you think about it in the terms of queer theory, there does seem to be an interesting metaphor going on here. Norman literally cannot go through with having sex with a woman. And similarly, the only reason that we're given for why Maureen lost her faith was that she couldn't stop having thoughts of sins of the flesh.
I began to dwell upon things that I would never know.
What things?
Hungers for the flesh, Father.
That's all she says. She doesn't explain who she was attracted to, just that the other nuns chided her for it and she had to leave her faith because of it. This very much could mirror the real-life experience of countless queer people who have faced judgment from the church or from their religious families, and having to choose between staying in a toxic environment that demonizes them for feelings they can't control or leaving. I'm not trying to say that Maureen is a lesbian character, just that her experience mirrors one. And considering this film's director was a queer man, it wouldn't surprise me if that was intentional. But the fact that Norman is the killer and Maureen is a victim really doesn't say anything for representation here. There was an older version of the script released through Fangoria magazine where Duke was the killer. In this version of the movie, he would have been an obsessed Norman Bates fanboy, and he was killing people to try to get his attention. But Universal Studios insisted that Norman had to be the killer, which I think is kind of a shame. The entire second movie was about Norman trying to return to normalcy, while everyone around him kept pulling him back into the past. So if Duke had been the killer, then this would have just been a continuation of that narrative, rather than undoing all the progress that had been made in the last movie. Plus, it would have been interesting to see Norman cleaning up after murders that he didn't actually commit, showing how hard of a time he has separating fact from fiction. This version of the script also had Maureen as a psychiatrist who took the place of Dr. Raymond, checking in on Norman every once in a while, and this is another change that I wish they hadn't made. She could still be a Christian, but at least making her a psychiatrist would have given her a little bit more strength and agency. Although it would have blurred the lines as far as consent goes, it's just kinda creepy when a psychiatrist gets involved with their patient. I'd hazard to say that Anthony Perkins' performance is a little bit less interesting than it was in the last two movies too. He's fine, he just comes across as awkward. And I don't even mean in that stuttery, socially awkward kind of way.
No bother at all. Anyway, people should look out for each other, don't you think?
I sort of wondered if it was a result of him taking an old Hollywood acting style into an 80s slasher movie. But other old Hollywood actors are able to make the transition without problem, so all in all, I did enjoy this movie, but definitely less than its predecessors. It obviously isn't as tight as Hitchcock's film, and it doesn't take a stance as unique as Psycho 2 did when it comes to its villain. If anything, it just kind of feels like a lesser, more typically slasher version of the first movie, just from Norman's perspective. Which is kind of cool to see, but end of day, it's unnecessary. We aren't learning anything that we didn't know before, we're just seeing things that were previously kept in mystery. All in all, I'd give this movie 6 outdoor topless scenes out of 10. I enjoyed my viewing experience, but it won't be one that I take with me for a long time to come. Now, make sure that you subscribe to this channel and click that little bell thingy to get notified, because next time, we're talking about the last time that Anthony Perkins ever appeared as Norman Bates. We're talking about the sequel and prequel, Psycho 4: The Beginning.
Oh, I've killed before. And now I'm gonna have to do it again.
And trust me when I say that you won't want to miss it. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and while you're down there, why don't you leave me a comment? Let me know if you've ever seen Psycho 3, and if so, what did you think of it? Thank you so much for watching, my pets, and I will see you next time. Love you.